chats with people in the community doing great things, people who are creating community in the places that we love. And have you ever felt like whether you're moving into someplace new, a new community or not, maybe it's already the community you've been in for a long time, that you're not quite sure how to show up? We get the message often that, we need to be our authentic selves and be ourselves, but we're also living in a time where things are quite, how do we say, a little more touchy. So how do you authentically show up as yourself, and is there a cost to that? That's what we're talking about today on Life Coach Friday. And because it's Life Coach Friday, that means Annette Walters is joining me from ReloWomen. Hello, Annette.
Hello, Natalie. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I am excited to see you once again.
This is
I
going to
love
be
it.
a fun topic.
It is. It's very, when we were talking about this topic, it's very precise yet very broad. And we chatted a little bit about how, in my community, in the Lake Minnetonka community, like many, we have kids that are going back to school full time. We're making a lot of shifts and we're making a lot of changes, and not everything fits everyone. So we find ourselves in these positions where we still want to advocate for our kids or ourselves and the changes going on in our community, but in a way where we, can still be friendly and maintain that sense of community. So what do
hmm
you think? I mean, where do we start with this? Is there a cost to showing up as yourself?
Well, I would say that it depends because, it's all that life coaching thing. But let's talk about what is the perceived cost of showing up as yourself?
Hmm.
Let's say that let's say that you're impassioned about changing something in your community, and you're quite upset because maybe the city council has made a ruling that you don't agree with,
Hmm.
or perhaps your school isn't providing the services that you think that your school should provide. We're impassioned, we're emboldened, we are how are we we're showing up for our cause. But when we show up as our cause, you can imagine, even because I've had that happen, especially with schools. I've shown up where I've been upset, and maybe there's some tears, or there's some yelling, or there's some, you're going to do this for me. And I'm showing up as my full self. But am I showing up as my full self? Or am
That's
I
a
just
good
showing up as
point.
part of myself?
Or am I just showing up as someone who is angry because I think that's what's going to help me get to where I'm going, or
hmm
get done what I need to be done, or get someone to hear me?
Right. So, you know what? The first step that I'd like to discuss and kind of tee up and talk about with you is, what is showing up for ourselves? Let's define that first,
Hmm.
because I think that, it's kind of a moving target. And especially with all of the different personality styles and things like that, sometimes we think, oh, we have to show up as that driver type in order
Yeah.
to get things done. But what if you're a real detail-oriented engineer type?
Yeah. What,
You know
a good example that comes to mind for me is I've gotten the comment a couple times because I really am. I enjoy other people and getting to know them and hearing their stories. And it's a large part of why I got into real estate, is because I love being part of such a big thing like buying a home, or when people are moving for a variety of reasons. And
Mhm.
I have had experiences where, I like to show up and right off the bat, I want to make it fun. It's going to be exciting. And yeah, there are things that are going to happen and things that can get crazy, but I still want to maintain my own integrity, but that also includes my desire to have fun and keep things, positive and moving along. And, I've had a couple times where I was questioned on that, like, well, no, you need to be more tough or more aggressive. And I feel that, well, with who I am, I can hold my position, I can negotiate fine and still be pleasant, because though I
Mhm.
am not pleasant all the time, when I'm working and I'm representing clients, I'm pleasant. And it really is where I rather be. And I think that's why I love my job so much, because it pushes me to really be who I am. And that is,
Hmm.
I'm finding, is the best way to get things done, even if I'm not fitting into a mold of what somebody else maybe expects or how they expect me to react. So, is that kind of what you're talking about in terms of, we can be faced with a situation, and then how we choose to
Right.
react, how we choose to react to it? Because I know a lot of people who sometimes in the moment you might react in a way that is really kind of a not nice way, but that's not really who that person is to begin with anyways.
Hmm. Well, exactly. And let's say that you are advocating for one of your clients and you're and this is what happens a lot of times is that we match energy to energy. So if somebody comes up aggressive against us, we then drop into maybe aggressive, even though we may not be an aggressive type. So what happens when we take on that? So let me back up just a little bit into your example and talk about what happens to us when we drop into a place that isn't actually us. We're matching the energy and we think that we're doing that so that we can get things done, but we're dropping into this energy that isn't who we are. It's like that driver type of a thing because ever since Dale Carnegie back in the 1900s when the book was written, the everybody thinks that they should be an extrovert and a driver type and a salesperson type, and that's not who most of us are. It's only probably 20 to 30% of the population. But when
Sure.
we drop into that, we are so distracted by trying to take on that persona, we actually lose out on what we're trying to accomplish. So our message in that will become convoluted. Am I pausing on your end? Because I am
Nope.
pausing on my end. Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just shut down a couple of things just to make sure, because that's the way
Yeah.
tech works in my world.
Yes. So I what
So,
if I'm hearing you correctly, then it's really how, and in your example, if someone shows up and, and for my life, and I'm, I'm meeting with another realtor, negotiating a deal, and if they're getting, aggressive and angry, and in my nature, I'm more my mind goes to like, hey man, like what's what's going on, how is, you did you have a rough day? I kind of almost want to go into solution mode and give the person a hug, which we're not really allowed to do during the pandemic anymore.
no, but you shift right into
But
aloha mode. You know
yeah, and
what?
that's the thing. It's
Let's
in
just
my
make this all
nature.
work. And
Yeah, I'm like, let's make it happen. That whole, I still have that island
mhm,
spirit and aloha spirit, very much so. So what I'm hearing you
mhm,
say then is I can still be myself in those situations. And what I find when I do that, when I just stay true to who I am in the situation, it goes smoothly. And if nothing else, if it doesn't go smoothly, I'm not the one stressed out about it, because I feel comfortable in what I'm doing and getting done. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways with what you're saying in terms of, showing up as ourselves when it comes time to get things done. What do you think we
mhm.
can do when we find ourselves, let's take the example of, a parent. We have, kids in the Lake Minnetonka area who are going to be going back to school. Some are already back in school full time. And it's a big change to go from where kids were and what they were doing. And it can be frustrating. So what would you suggest if you feel, say a parent reaches out to the district or a teacher, but they're really frustrated and they want to advocate for their kids, but with an end goal in mind of, whatever they're trying to achieve, whether it's more, one-on-one time with a teacher or some extra help. What are some tools to not go right into that place of aggressiveness and anger because you're not getting what you're asking for?
Um, you know, well, let's talk about it. Why
Hmm.
do we go into aggressiveness? Why do
I,
we
I
get
mean,
there and we're angry? Why has that happened?
I think it's
Mm,
more personally, I think it's out of fear. I feel like when people start getting very angry, especially when it's that instant reaction, that it's usually a fear of, they're afraid of, or they think that something's going on that is a threat to them in some way. So that instinct is to
Right.
kind of meet it with this, aggressive anger. And then that
Right,
doesn't get
because
anywhere.
well, and you're talking about schools. You're talking
Hmm.
about the environment that is supposed to protect, educate, and empower our children, and now they're not meeting our expectations. And
Yeah.
beyond that, perhaps we have a whole slew of things that we're thinking at this point. Like we're thinking that, well, by golly, my child is entitled to this. Now I don't mean to use entitled in that the negative sense, but it's in the rules and this is what they should be giving my child. Or this teacher knows better and they're not showing up or and playing by the rules.
Hmm.
And, a lot of times, especially as parents, we can get into this and think, well, I'm going to get in there and make them do it. When's the
And that
last
always
time you went
goes
into a
so well.
bureaucracy and made them do it? But when we are in that place of, we're feeling this fear, we're feeling this, oh, what other emotions would you say? Frustration.
Hmm.
Maybe we're disappointed. Maybe we've dropped into hopelessness. Like this isn't the first time that this has happened. And maybe we've even started to think, this is my only option for educating my child. We're hopeless. There's no other options. And when we show up to have a conversation from a place of fear and hopelessness and frustration, it doesn't actually allow us to hear anything.
Hmm.
It doesn't allow us to see what's going on. Because ultimately, when we are trying to do something like that, we are working with a known system that ultimately, if we want to keep our kid there, we have to know and navigate, even though we're not part of the system. So, in order to do that, we have to learn about the system, we have to know about the system. So, what if we went into that conversation and we had an emotion of curiosity? I
Mm.
love curiosity.
So, in other words, kind of, if I'm understanding you, not going at it with, already making assumptions about what's happening or what's going to happen, but find out kind of more of, well, I wonder why is it that way? Maybe there's a reason for it, kind of a
Mhm.
thing. So if it's, say, scheduling or being able to, if you want your child in a different class, but they're not able to accommodate that, you know, rather than getting angry and being really aggressive about it, to find out, well, what is the situation? Because if one parent's
Mm.
running into it, maybe other ones are too, but there's usually
Right.
a reason for it. So if we're curious about it, I can ask, why is it this way? What's going
Mhm.
on and how's it going to look in the future? Because sometimes I find too that, especially with the way things have been changing in our community so much and so fast, going one way and another way, throughout different shutdowns, and now more and more things are opening and kids are going back to school, is it's changing. So it can create a lot of feelings of instability, where the
Oh,
new normal is
uncertainty.
almost, there is no normal.
Mhm.
Yeah, that uncertainty. So
Mhm.
approaching it from a place of curiosity would be inquiring about it. What is going on? What is going to go on? And being open to hear
Mhm.
it. So that's kind of what I'm
Right.
hearing is a good way to go.
And see that as you said, that drops us into a place where we can hear, which is what we need to do in order to be good advocates. Because good advocates see all sides of what's going on, and then they advocate, and they even can come up with solutions that maybe the people in charge have never thought of, but are well within that box
Hmm.
that they work. They just need to see it in a different way. Now, one of the things I want to add on to this, because somebody might, watching or listening to this might be thinking, well, curiosity is all good and fine, but what if they don't do anything about it?
Yeah.
So dropping into curiosity doesn't mean that you're agreeing with what they're saying or that you're condoning what has gone on. what a lot of times when I'm coaching, what we're doing is that we're separating out these things because they are all independent. Because once we drop into curiosity and we get all of the information, we see so many different options.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine imagine your decision making. How much better is your decision making with these options? I mean, so many people
Exactly.
had decided, well, I could never, homeschool my kids. Well, until about 18 months ago or a little less. Nobody had ever considered, or a lot of people hadn't considered it. And with the pandemic, it put the option on the table. Now, before, the only option they saw was I'm sending my child to organized school, whether it's public school or private school or, some version therein. And now, because we've walked through this and parents have been forced to, think about educating their children differently, all sorts of options are being tapped into by a number of different parents. And so when we get out of that mindset that this is the only way to do this, we actually can make more. I'm going to step back from that. We can actually make better decisions about the overall, say, education of our children because we see the other options. Perhaps, parents even today continue to do public school, but they found this other like STEM program that's
Sure.
online that isn't available in their current public school. And now they're going to do that as well. And maybe it counts for credit so that they can cut back, especially in the high school years, as to
Yeah.
how many hours that they're actually in school, kind of like, not professional sports, but when the kids have sports outside of school and they get
Mm-hmm.
time off because of
We
that.
can see more
Maybe that's yeah.
solutions.
Mhm. More solutions.
More
And
solutions.
what I want to even argue is that when we drop into this place of curiosity, which leads us to openness, which leads us to seeing all these other solutions, is that is when we are our best, most creative, and best showing up as ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't that like even cause a place of peace for you? Kind of a knowing.
Yeah, it does because it feels more that I don't need to be on the defense or I don't need to be,
Mhm.
come at something with this preconceived idea that this person isn't going to want to cooperate with me, but approaching it from, like you said, curiosity, find out what's going on, kind of put that. It's almost like you just put down the weapons, just put
Mhm.
down the guard and just take a look at what actually is without making
Mhm.
these assumptions about it right off the bat. So in the example of
And
if you
see what
needed
you
to advocate for your kid at school, that I could see that leading to where you can see options and solutions you would not have seen before.
And I like how you said put down the weapons because in this case, you are neither on defense or on offense. You're just participating. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you are not effective or not as able or you're not bringing your weapons with you to fight the good fight. It's that you're coming at this and you're determined. What is something that somebody could say about you that would just make you laugh, like, "You don't know me at all."
Let's see. It would probably be that I absolutely love events with large amounts of people. That would be no.
Exactly. Now imagine somebody trying to use that against you, because that's
Mhm.
the other thing that I wanna talk about here is that, we talked about earlier, dropping into that aloha spirit. What if you're judged for that?
Oh, yeah, no, I am.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
and
I
does it
definitely
bother you?
am. No, not anymore.
Why
I've
why doesn't it bother you?
because kind of along the lines of what you're saying, I find, and and I come from a different culture, even though Hawaii is part of the United States. It's such a melting pot of cultures. The culture is it's very different in many ways, and we see that a lot in different states even. And
Mhm.
it's what I find is sometimes people don't, there's kind of almost a mistrust of it. Like you really can't be that friendly, or
Uh-huh.
that I'm too, neutral or too much, Switzerland because I can see the different sides of things. And a lot of that is because of the
Mhm.
way I was raised. I was raised with a lot of different cultures and nationalities, religious beliefs. I mean, they don't call Hawaii the melting pot for nothing. And through that, I was able to learn that, I can have a view and a way of doing something. Someone else can have a view and a way of doing something, but what we bond over is our shared goal. Even though we might be getting there different ways. In the same way that we
Mhm.
choose to have different jobs and different, different careers. So
Mhm.
it doesn't bother me because it's who I am and it's where I feel comfortable. And I just think it's better to approach things where you can communicate about it and keep it positive without having to, go all negative. Not that I've never done that.
Mhm.
If you ask my children, they would be telling a very different tale.
Well, that's what our children do. That's why we bore them, is because they are
Hmm.
there to help us keep humble. So, that is one of the other points that I wanna bring up is, showing up as yourself.
Hmm.
Is that I think that many of us don't show up as ourselves because of that fear of being judged. I mean, we've been judged before, but what happens when we are judged, when we are told that we shouldn't, and this was the same thing that I got. I got the same kind of, result moving to the Midwest is that I grew up in the South between the blonde hair, the constant smile, and the little chatty Cathy thing that I got going on. It was like, why? Why are you doing that? And I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. But I digress. But that that part of being judged then is like, "Oh, no, you need to tamp down who you are. You're too much. You need to, not do that." But you're like, "Yeah, but that's who I am.
Hmm.
How do I do it?" And so, what do you think what do you let's talk about being judged. What that's like.
Well, I think that, in that situation, when it comes to being judged for who you are, and we'll use myself as an example as we have been. And I think that it very much, I mean, back to your question of why it doesn't bother me, it's because who I am is I do try to look at that with that curiosity, because I
Mhm,
noticed it was something very different in the Midwest, from, I mean, really even the East Coast and the West Coast, just on the mainland. It's very
mhm,
different culturally from living in Hawaii. Just like for other people, if you were to go from here to Hawaii, it would be very different for you, but you can still be who you are. And I find that as long as I'm doing that and I'm curious about someone else and why they are the way they are, or I'm getting to know them as they are,
mhm.
and I'm accepting of that, that the judgment of me even goes away. Is kind of how I notice. It's almost like once what you put out, you get kind of a thing. Um,
Mhm,
that's been my experience with how I've dealt with it. And I know that I'm not
mhm,
everybody's cup of tea, but I also believe in then finding, find your tribe and find what works. Because like I'm very chatty. I'm an oversharer. Well, look at my, career. I've been in radio, I've done television, I'm doing this now. All those skills go well with real estate because I love talking to people and getting to know them and their story. And,
mhm,
even when I've done social media marketing, same thing is I'm sharing and telling someone's story, and that's what I'm passionate about. So maybe part of it
mhm,
is, making sure you're creating an environment that is yours where,
mhm.
you really can be yourself. Although I can't imagine anywhere where I would be working where it might be very annoying to work with me in some
And
circumstances, because how exciting could it be to working in like Laverne and Shirley where they did the bottle caps and stuff. Like I would still be having fun there.
exactly. But see, I think we self-select where we are and who we belong to, the groups and
Yes.
things like that. But, I think we have both belonged to 2 groups, and I'm gonna use that loosely. that, when we belonged to these groups, we didn't actually show up in the world
Hmm.
as ourselves. We couldn't, because we couldn't either be part of anybody else, or if we shared what group we belonged to, then that we would be judged for that. And that would then allow us to be shunned or things like that. I mean, think about think about even the 2016 election. I
Hmm.
mean, the polls had Hillary winning,
Hmm.
and yet Trump won. Why? Because nobody was brave enough to actually say that they were going to vote for him, because that would then isolate them and potentially make them a target,
Sure.
an ugly, ugly target. And so when we have that sort of a contention that shows up, and we are at risk of being ostracized
Hmm.
from the group, that's one of the things that keeps us from showing up as ourselves. And that may be, the PTA mommies. And I use that loosely because I was one.
Hmm.
But, it was, or maybe, we can't show up as ourselves, or we don't think we should at work. Are we doing our best work at work if
No, I can't imagine.
we can't bring our whole selves there? I mean, maybe it's a poor fit as far as
Hmm.
companies for us, and maybe that's a sign that we need to do something different. But when we show up as our best selves, we do our best work. But you know, it's that, I guess, bringing it back around to that judged and balancing, being potential of being ostracized to um, being included. Do we have
Hmm.
a choice? And I think a lot of us think that we don't have a choice. This is
But
the
we
only
do,
way.
is what you're saying, is we do have a choice in,
Mhm.
in how we choose to show up. So maybe then, as our, so we wrap it up here. I mean, my takeaway is that if we, because I found this to be true, if I practice acceptance with other people, that I get more of that acceptance back. When I meet someone, I know that they might have an opposing view to mine on something. I can almost always find something that we do see eye to eye on, because again, going back to, we might both, you share an end goal, but you might just have a different way of getting there. Right.
Mhm.
So if we can just accept that and let people be, who they are in their space, because it really doesn't, it's really no, unless someone's doing something that's criminal and hurting other people.
Mhm.
Because, but we're talking about, being your true self. And most
Mhm.
people, I believe, are good people.
And see, that's where, before we end this, one of the things that we talked about 2 weeks ago on our Life Coach Friday was, what are we making it mean? And I think this is where it comes down to, when we don't show up as ourselves, or somebody else is showing up in a way that makes us uncomfortable.
Hmm.
What are we making that mean about us? What are we making it mean about the situation if we, and I put that in air quotes in case this is a podcast. Um,
Hmm.
um, um, now I'm not even going to air quote it because I can't remember what I was going to
Yeah.
say.
What
But
are we making that
what are we
mean?
making it mean? Right? Because we're making it mean something about us, that we're making a shift or we're not being accepting, and yet it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Hmm.
And so, as we wrap up, when you come across a situation where it's difficult, or you have to have a strained conversation, if you think about, okay, if I want to drop into curiosity, if I want to drop into this being figure outable, what do I have to think about this in
Hmm.
order to be there during the conversation? And if I remember that, it's a lot more likely that I'm not going to lose my cool, because I'm just trying to figure this out. I'm not being a lame duck, and I'm or over aggressive. I'm just being me, and I'm going to figure this out. And you can be adamant, and you can stay in there and, be relentless, but you can still just be you.
Yeah, you can get a lot done and still be pleasant.
Exactly.
That's how I try to keep
Exactly.
it. Well, I appreciate
So,
you and our Life Coach
oh, I
Friday.
appreciate you.
Yeah, and if anyone listening, if you have suggestions of topics or questions for Annette, things you'd like us to talk about and share on Life Coach Friday, make sure you go ahead and post those in the comments, or you can also private message me through Natalie Webster Realtor here on Facebook, and you can reach me through email through nataliewebsterrealtor.com. In case you don't want to publicly post your question for Life Coach Friday. And we'll get it tackled because we're doing this every other Friday and we're streaming on multiple pages in the Lake Minnetonka area here. Because as our community is changing, I think we can all use tools to better get along. And what we're doing here with Chat with Nat is it's a platform to share people in our community who are creating community in the places that we love. So same with you. If you have a suggestion for a guest that you think should be on, reach out to me in either of those ways. And Annette, thank you so much for a fabulous Life Coach Friday. And everyone else, I will chat at you later.